Okay, shalom, and welcome to the practical Parsha for Parshat Mishpatim. The Parsha begins, Ve'ela HaMishpatim Asher Tasim Lifneihem. These are the laws that you shall place, or you shall set before them. And as the sages tell us, that the language that HaShem uses here is to set before them. When you use the word set, you use the word place. What comes to mind? A setting at a table. It should be so clear. It should be so ready to eat, ready to use, ready to implement. There should be no doubt, no confusion that it's like a shulchan aruch, like a prepared table, like one comes to a set table ready to eat. Everything is out there, an entire spread, and there's no preparation required. This is very important, and actually, in fact, the code of Jewish law, therefore, is called Shulchan Aruch, because it's written in a way where one reads and knows what to do or what not to do. So the truth is that this Parsha, which comes on the heels of last week's Parsha was the Parsha of the giving of the Torah. And you see that this Parsha speaks primarily, I should say mostly, about laws concerning matters between Ben Adam Lachaviro, between man and man. Issues of honesty, issues of safety and well-being, issues of damages, issues of, God forbid, if somebody steals from another person, somebody wrongs another person, somebody hurts another person, somebody causes a loss to another person. It's amazing that this is what Hashem chose to speak about right after the giving of the Torah. Not only to talk about it or to mention it, rather, or moreover, to emphasize that this needs to be clear. There's no other part of the Torah that Hashem says to Moshe, well, I want you to teach it to them in such a clear manner that there's no doubt, that it's all ready to eat, that it's all ready to implement. This he did. And this tells us how important it is in Hashem's eyes. Where although Hashem chose, when he gave us the Ten Commandments, to begin the first five with those lofty, more spiritual, more abstract ideas and things that he wants us to know and be aware of. And it's only the latter half of the Ten Commandments in which Hashem discusses, do not kill, do not steal, which really is the general mitzvah for all the details that are to follow, namely in this Parsha. And Hashem therefore emphasizes to us that this is more important in his eyes. This is more crucial to Hashem than even I am Hashem your God, you should have no other gods, don't take my name in vain, and so on. That he did not emphasize right after the giving of the Torah. But moving forward, it's important to note that if one really wants to eat, enjoy this meal, eat off this table, in other words, one really wants to fully understand and have a good comprehension and practical application of everything that's discussed in this Parsha. Truth be said, one needs to, I would say, dedicate at least a good 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the level of dedication and the level of diligence that one may have, to study at least, and what comes to mind offhand, at least 5 or 6 of the major tractates of the Talmud, because they discuss these laws at length, in detail, and come to the conclusions for us to be able to serve it to the table, for us to be able to actually use and implement them. So therefore, no matter how much we discuss this Parsha, no matter how much one would study it with the Rashis, one still would not only benefit, but it's almost imperative, not just as a suggestive thing, but it's almost imperative to study the Talmud, to have that good, full, comprehensive background in order to be able to fully understand the Parsha. But in any case, it's worth, as we do usually, to take at least 1 or 2 ideas from the Parsha and apply it in our practical day-to-day lives. And here it is. The very first mitzvah in this Parsha, what does Hashem discuss? The very first thing is Ki sikneh eved ivri. If you shall buy a Hebrew slave, a Jewish slave. What is this Jewish slave all about? The sages tell us that the only way a Jew can be sold as a slave, and you see I put it in quotations and I'll explain in a moment why, is only if a Jew had, God forbid, stolen someone else's property and cannot pay it back. As we find in this Parsha itself, in Judaism, according to Jewish law, for stealing, for theft, one does not sit in prison. There's no punitive damage, with the exception of a ganef that when he has to pay double. But otherwise, there's no punitive damage. It's just that the concept, according to the Torah, is you made somebody lose an X amount of money or an X amount of value, and now you have to make them whole. Now you have to return it. If you have the item itself and it's intact and it's in original state, then you must return that. You can't even keep it and say, I'll give you more money. No, you must return it. However, if it's been somewhat, in any way, if it's been altered, if it's been changed from its original state, then you pay the value of it. In other words, whatever the person lost, you fill his loss, his or her loss. What happens when you can't do that? Then the Bet Din will sell you as a slave. Of course, it comes without saying that the Beis Din is not eager to sell you as a slave. Thus, if you have a family member or a friend that's ready to bail you out, that's ready to do, what you need to do, ready to give you the money or loan you the money, gift you the money, in order for you to be able to pay back that debt that you have now, of course we wouldn't sell a person as a slave. So already, from the get-go, we realize that this is a person. If a person is getting sold as a slave, A, he committed a terrible sin, not only against God, but against a fellow man. He hurt someone. He hurt somebody by stealing from him, by taking away his money. Anybody, God forbid, who has gone through something like that knows that sense of violation that you have. It's not only the money that you lost, but you feel violated, that somebody came into your property, somebody stuck their hand into your cookie jar, or broke into your home, or whatever it may be, violated your privacy, violated your security, and took your thing. It really just like rips into you. So he committed a terrible sin. But to make matters worse, this person doesn't seem to be like a nice person. He has nobody in his life. He has no one that's ready to step up to the plate and say, okay, I'll give him a second chance. He's my cousin, he's this, he's always been a bad apple, but I'll take care of him. No one. He has no one to redeem him. And the only option left on the table is to sell him as a slave. That's what we're talking about. The only other scenario in which somebody gets sold as a slave is if, God forbid, somebody becomes so poor, he cannot support his family, he cannot support himself, and there's no other option other than selling himself for the 6-year duration of the work and becoming a slave to someone else. Which also tells us that there is something wrong with this picture. There's a person here who has nobody that's ready to help him, even though he had reached out to them. Obviously, he reached out. He couldn't just go and sell himself. He has to go and talk to somebody. When you come to a person, he goes, you know something? You have a brother, you have a sister, you have a brother-in-law, you have a father, you have a mother, you have a son, you have a daughter, somebody that can help you. I mean, a friend, a neighbor. You live in the middle of nowhere. Let's talk to people. Let's try to rile up the crowd and get them to help you. Each person will throw in a few pennies and you'll have enough to eat, so you don't have to sell yourself. So it's obvious that this person is not a very well-liked person. He's not part of society. And the only other option, he has to get sold as a slave. Now, what does the Torah tell us? This is some of the rules that the Torah chooses to highlight. Remember, there are many, many more rules, as some I will spell out soon, and the Talmud discusses at length. If you look at verse 3, what does it say? If he comes by himself, he leaves by himself. What does that mean, if he comes by himself, he leaves by himself? Obviously, he came by himself. You bought one slave, you didn't buy two slaves. You bought him, not anyone else. Well, the sages tell us, what is this telling us? What is Hashem saying? If he came himself, means if he was not married, then He came unmarried. The 6 years are up. He leaves. Bye-bye. Job well done. 10 years over. But if he was married, then he leaves with his wife. What does it mean he leaves with his wife? What? This is some kind of cruel joke? You bought one slave and you end up with a wife and children? This is child slave, enslavement and things like that? It's cruel. No. It's telling us that if he bought him as a slave and he's married, the person who purchased him as a servant is now obligated to support his wife and children. He's obligated to maintain the welfare of the family, to take care of their basic needs. So when he leaves, that obligation is dissolved, that obligation goes away, so it's as if she leaves with him. The Talmud also tells us, which is not written here clearly, but even logically one can come to this conclusion, that the rule is that this person is still a Jew. He is in the category of your brother. Okay? He's a contemporary. Therefore, you cannot mistreat him. You cannot degrade him in any way, shape, or form. Thus, the typical work that one would give to a slave, and that this is in time of slavery, which, parenthetically, I must note that even in those days, when people were very cruel to their slaves, already the Torah instructs us how to have compassion, even to a slave, but yes, the concept did exist. But the things that are used in order to degrade the slave, or to remind the slave, to put him in his place and remind him that, hey, you're a slave, you're not an equal here, that cannot be done to this Jewish servant, because he's a servant. He's just really an employee. He was leased for 6 years. Furthermore, the Talmud actually makes the statement, HaKoneh Eved Ivri Kikoneh Adam La'atzmo. One who purchases, one who acquires a Jewish servant is as if he acquired for himself a master. He paid money to have now a master, meaning a burden on his head. Why? Because you have to be so careful how you treat this person. You have to be so diligent in taking care of his family, and taking care of him in a way that you respect him, you don't hurt his feelings. And furthermore, the Talmud even paints a scenario. What happens if they're traveling, or they find themselves in a situation for whatever reason, that the master and servant are traveling and they only have one piece of bread. It's time for lunch. I'm hungry. I was so kind, so benevolent. I gave him a place. I gave him a place to work. I gave him a second chance. I'm starving. Oh, no. He's your obligation. You're hungry, that's your problem. The Torah obligates you to take that one piece of bread you have and give it to the servant, because he's a Jew. How can you let him go hungry? And you, not only is a Jew, but he's under your roof. He's under your obligation, under your responsibility. If you have one pillow and you need to go to sleep at night, I don't know why they would end up only on the way with one pillow. Well, he gets the pillow. Why? Because he's a Yid, and you have to treat him with respect, and you took it upon yourself. So I, the rich man, who was so benevolent, will end up sleeping without a pillow, and not sleeping at all, because I can't sleep without a pillow. So you see that this is a phenomenal concept. This is not something which is an ordinary, purchase or an ordinary investment that a wise businessman would do. In fact, if you think about anybody watching this, you had any sense of business, this is a terrible, terrible investment. I mean, if you really needed the work done, you can hire 3 people most probably for the amount of money and aggravation that this guy is going to cost you. So what is the purpose, and what can we learn from this? The idea behind it is as follows. As I already described, we're talking about somebody that's in a very, very low level in society, if he's in society at all. Obviously, he's not a good person. Even if he was ever a good person, poverty and necessity drove him into a place where he no longer has good qualities. He no longer has good character traits. He doesn't know how to get around. He doesn't know how to make it. He doesn't believe in himself. He steals. I mean, that's the only thing he can resort to, is to hurt others, to take from what belongs to others in order to just fill his empty stomach. Or worse, He's just a thief because that's all that gives him a drive and gives him that excitement and gets his adrenaline pumping. Because he won't go out there and have a normal job and use his skills and his wit for making earning an honest living. There's something wrong with this guy. Nebuch, something so wrong. What do we do with him? Throw him into a prison cell? Throw him away like a piece of trash? Put him in chains and tell him you know better than an animal? No. The Torah tells us how to rehabilitate a person. In fact, this is the real true correctional and rehabilitational facility that should be. The Torah says, go out there, find a person who's kind enough and is ready to give from his time, effort, energy, emotional wealth, psychological wealth, and his money to pay for this guy, to take him under his wing, let him spend 6 years in his home. 6 years is almost an eternity in the Torah because we know the sabbatical, a cycle of 7. Let him spend those 6 years there. He's going to learn responsibility. He has to work. He can't just hang around there and just eat off the fat of the land. He's not going to eat for free. He has obligations. I describe the obligations of the master to him. But he's got a lot of obligations. He has to treat his master with respect. He has to learn, diligence. He has to learn how to work. He learns commitment. But he also learns benevolence. He also learns that somebody believes in him. This guy wouldn't have shelled out that amount of money to cover his debt if he didn't believe in him. And then he sees what compassion can bring, what honesty can bring, and that there's a better way in life. This is all with the hope that this guy will be rehabilitated. How beautiful our world would have been today, or would be, or still could be, if that's what the correctional facilities would be. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a guy who's easy on crime. Okay, I don't condone, God forbid, any kind of hurting others or, criminal activity. But even if somebody's committed that because of a bad upbringing, because of bad friends, because of bad environment, there's got to be a way to get them to believe in themselves. Now, will everybody be rehabilitated 100%? Or 100% of everybody can be rehabilitated? Most probably not. But a majority of humans can. HaShem created the human being. There must be a lot of promise in at least most of the human beings, even those who've committed crimes. Moving forward, another beautiful concept here in the Parsha. This is chapter 22, Book of Shemot, chapter 22, verse 8. This is the middle of the description of the what we call the 4 watchmen. I mean, that alone is most probably tens of pages in the Tanya, in the Talmud. Not probably, certainly. Chapters that discuss the various aspects and the various details and the laws which spin off of it, are spun off of it that apply to other matters of, monetary matters and so on. This verse, I'm going to read the verse. It says, in every question of dishonesty, whether it involves an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or anything that was allegedly lost, to which the witness says, this is it, the claims of both parties must be brought before the judges, and the one who the judges find guilty must pay double restitution to his neighbor. Now this verse is one of those verses that requires surgery. When I say requires surgery, reading the verse itself as is, it's unclear, and not only is it unclear, but one who begins to study and begins to really get an appreciation and understanding of the laws here of these 4 watchmen realizes that it's a mishkababel. It's out of place. It's wrong. Doesn't make sense. It negates what already has been said. So the end of the story is, just to make a long story short, that this verse tells us several laws, and one of them I'm going to focus on, and the lesson of it. And that is the law which is represented in the words, this is it. If the person says this is it, then the matter has to come before the judges. Now when it says here the matter has to come before the judges, what it really means is he's obligated to swear. This is the concept which anybody who's studied a little Talmud will immediately jump up and go, yes, I know that one. It's called modeh b'miktzat. One who makes a partial admission. And the rule is, chayav shvuah. The person is obligated to swear to get himself off the hook. If he is not ready to swear, either because he's over righteous, he's afraid to take an oath, take God's name in vain, no problem, then you have to pay. And the question is, what is the logic behind this? And let me explain. If I summon you to the Beit Din, to the court, and say you owe me $100, you look me square in the eye and you go, I don't. What happens now? I have the burden of proof. I made a claim against him. He says it's not true. Right? It's not true. He denies the whole thing. What happens then? If I can prove it, I'll bring some kind of document, witnesses, something. Then the burden of proof will shift now from me to him. And now he will have to prove, A, that he doesn't owe it anymore, that he paid it, that it's not true, that the witnesses are false, whatever the case may be. But this is saying, if he looks at me and he goes, you know something? I don't owe you $100, but I do owe you $50. Gotcha. Now you have to swear. The Bezdin is going to say, you have to swear. What's the logic behind it? Remember, if we go this blindly, I don't know, Hashem said so. But there's got to be a logic here. Not only has to be a logic, whenever it comes to money matters, everything is logical. It's got to make sense. Yes, we do it because Hashem said so. But Hashem said so with a logic that even humans can understand. We mortal beings can relate to, can study and appreciate. And apply that logic to other matters that are similar. The logic behind it, says the Talmud, is as follows. The Talmud says, Ein Adam Meiz Panav Bifnei Bal Chovo. That normally, we're talking about a normal, healthy human being, an average human being, cannot have the chutzpah, the audacity to look a person who has been benevolent to him, to look him in the eye and to deny it. Just a normal person cannot do it. It takes a psychopath, a good con man, right? But your regular person will break. A person comes and summons him to court and says, you owe me money. If indeed the person categorically denies it, it could be he's just denying it because he's a good con artist. That he denies it because he's got a lot of gal, he's got a lot of chutzpah. But it could very well be because it's a false claim, or it's not a valid claim. So then the burden of proof is on the person summoning him to court, the tovea. However, in this case, says the Talmud, the logic is, from the fact that the person made a partial admission, it tells us that he just didn't sum up enough gal, enough chutzpah, to deny it entirely. Yet on the other hand, he's trying to wiggle his way out of it. So what did he do? He made a partial admission. So that kind of, what's the word, that takes the edge off that chutzpah. It takes the edge off the pain, the sting of looking the guy in the eye and go, never took any money from you. I don't know what you're talking about. Because you did. Your face is turning red. Your heart's beating faster, right? But when you figure in your mind the justification is a partial admission, and even something, I'm not such a bad guy. Look, right now I'm going to give him the $50 now. I'll pay it. They'll make me pay it. Everything is over. And one day when I have money, I'll slip $50 under his door. He'll get his money back. Whether you really intend to do it or not, but that's your way of getting the guilt, the Yiddish guilt, okay, out of the equation. Says the Torah, swear. Swear. And if you can swear, if you have the chutzpah to swear, and I want to tell you, even in a good case, in a normal circumstance, when you have to swear, they first read you the riot act. Explain to you what happens when one swears, when take God's name, even if it's true. How much more so if you're taking God's name in vain and you're saying a lie. I mean, you can literally almost, they would describe to you, you can see the floor opening up and the flames of hell just burning under your feet. That's how descriptive they were. Then they made you hold a Torah. You're like, oh, you know what? How much is it? Let me pay the whole thing and get it over with. And that is the point. So this is the rule. How does this apply to our lives? I want you to think about it. The truth is, first of all, religiously, I'm talking about our connection to HaShem. I don't think there's a Jew out there I don't think there's a Jew out there that willingly and knowingly would say, you know something? There's a connection. There's that, what we call that rope, that invisible tether that connects me to HaShem, my soul to HaShem. And I want to now take this big giant scissor and just cut it. I'm taking a chainsaw out there and just cut it. Nobody wants to do it. But the fact is, we all, and I'm sadly the best example, the worst example, I don't know how you want to describe it. We all want to be connected to Hashem. We all feel connected to Hashem. But yet we end up doing little things here and there that keep on chipping away on that rope. As the Alter Rebbe explained several days ago, we read in the Tanya, that little tiny strands, but they accumulate to a big gash in that rope, in that connection. Where does that come from? Because the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, has us in the process of partial admission. It's not really like, he takes off the, come on, this is just a little, this is the thing. So, in general, you can ask me, am I a Jew? Of course. Am I a proud Jew? Double, of course. You know what I mean? Would I do anything for Judaism? Of course. So why don't I overcome this little temptation and that little inkling and that little weakness that I have? Oh, that's Modeh Mikdash. Where is the spiritual idea? That's when Hashem says, you are obligated, the shvuah, the oath. What is that oath? We know that before a child is born, the Talmud tells us that they make the neshama, the soul, they make him swear. That's what the Tanya opens up with. They make him swear that he's going to be righteous, he's not going to be wicked, that he's going to stand up to his obligations, his or her obligations, while the soul is in the body. And as we know, as Chassidus explains, the shvuah, the word shvuah, also with a slightly different vowels, slightly different punctuation, points, could be read sivua, which means that they actually they saturate the soul with all the energy and all the potential and all the strength that it needs in order to be able to carry out this mission. So when one sees that they're starting to slip in this partial admission way of life, you need to grab on, you need to hold on to that shvuah. You have to reaffirm your connection and start to dig in and to connect, to plug in. That's the word, to plug in to that energy that was given to you, and it's just sitting there dormant, waiting for one to tap into it. But this also works, if you think about it, emotionally, psychologically, in relationships. If you ask somebody, do you love your family? And I'm talking to myself now, I'm looking in this figurative mirror right now. Do you love your family? Of course. Do you love your wife and children? Of course. So how come you do this? How come? Those are those little things that we don't see how they affect the big picture. And they chip away slowly. So you say, woman, would you take God forbid, you take a hammer or hit her on the head? Oh no, I wouldn't do that to anyone, let alone my own loved ones. But emotionally, you keep on, it's not a big giant hammer. Mm-hmm. It's not an axe, but it's a little tiny hammer that you keep on hitting on their nerves, and you keep on damaging them. And you keep on, severing those little tiny strands that connect you to them, and then connect them to a better life in the future, to a good, healthy, normal life. So these are the things where it says you need to take that oath again. If it's that oath of, let's say in a marriage, that says, we are going to be together no matter what. We're going to love each other. We're going to trust each other. We're going to make each other happy, right? Even though we do not say that under a chuppah, and that's an interesting thing. I know, not to compare, but in other religions, they actually verbalize these things. I can say perhaps we don't have to verbalize. It comes without saying. You understand? It's like if I'm buying a car, I'm obviously buying a car not to put in my backyard and use it as a barbecue pit. You're buying a car because I want to drive somewhere with it. I'm going to transport people. I'm going to transport bags in there. But it's not going to become a barbecue pit. You understand? You don't need to spell that out. If I'm getting married, why am I getting married? So I'm going to respect you, I'm going to love you, I'm going to cherish you, I'm going to give you a good life as best as possibly I can. So that's the oath. The oath is, you don't have to say each oath. The oath comes without saying. So that's what I'm here, that's for me the lesson, this week. What could we do, to make somebody else feel valuable, going back to the first mitzvah? Even a person who has lost it a little bit, even a person who's committed some bad things. What can I do to show that person? I may not purchase that person and keep him in my house for 6 years. I get it. But what action, or what words can I say to make that person feel like, you know what, I believe in you. Someone believes in you. Someone cares about you. And then this, for those around me, their loved ones, that I really want them to be whole and everything, to make them feel at least a little better. To take off that partial damage that I keep on doing, chipping away all the time at them. Shalom.